The gunshot echoed across the Montana plains as Silas Ingram pulled the trigger, dropping the first of the Blackwater Gang outlaws with deadly precision. It was 1878, and the wild frontier of Montana Territory held no mercy for men like these who preyed on the innocent. 3 more bandits remained, their horses skittish as they circled the overturned stagecoach where 3 young women huddled together, the eldest protectively shielding her younger sisters. "That's one warning," Silas called out, his voice carrying across the wind-swept prairie. "There won't be a second." The outlaws turned toward him, squinting against the setting sun that silhouetted Silas atop his dun stallion. The wind rustled his worn leather duster as he leveled his Winchester repeating rifle with practiced ease. At 32, Silas had spent more than a decade riding these territories, first as a cavalry scout, then as a ranch hand, and now as a drifter with a reputation for standing against injustice. "This ain't your business, stranger," the lead outlaw shouted, a man with a patchy beard and a scar running down his left cheek. "These ladies are our payday. The ransom for 3 garrison daughters will set us up nice." Silas worked the lever on his rifle with a smooth motion. "I'm making it my business." 2 more shots rang out in quick succession. One outlaw clutched his shoulder and toppled from his saddle while another's hat flew off as the bullet grazed his scalp. The third man, seeing his companions fall, turned his horse and galloped away, disappearing over the rolling hills. Silas approached the stagecoach cautiously, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of returning danger. The women remained huddled together, their fine dresses now covered in dust and torn in places. Their trunks had been ransacked, belongings scattered across the prairie ground. "Are you ladies hurt?" Silas dismounted, keeping his rifle ready as he approached. The eldest of the 3 women straightened up, brushing a strand of auburn hair from her face. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with a determined set to her jaw despite the fear in her eyes. "We're unharmed, thanks to you, sir," she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "I'm Vivian Garrison. These are my sisters, Emma and Charlotte." Emma, who looked about 19, nodded silently while Charlotte, clearly the youngest though still a young woman of perhaps 18, wiped tears from her dirt-smudged face. "Silas Ingram," he replied with a slight tip of his hat. "Your driver," Vivian's expression fell. "Dead. They shot him when he tried to fight them off. The horses bolted with the front half of the coach." Silas surveyed the wreckage. The stagecoach had broken apart when it overturned, the rear portion where the women had been riding now lying on its side. Their luggage was strewn about, much of it emptied by the bandits searching for valuables. "Where were you headed?" he asked, already gathering what undamaged belongings he could find. "Sloan," Vivian replied, helping her sisters to their feet. "Our father arranged for us to stay with our aunt after our mother passed, but—" her voice broke slightly. "We received word at our last stop that our aunt has died as well. We have nowhere to go now." The setting sun cast long shadows across the prairie as Silas considered their situation. Sloan was still a good 20 miles away, and night would fall soon. The wounded outlaws had fled, but the Blackwater Gang was notorious in these parts. They wouldn't take kindly to having their plans disrupted and their men shot. "We need to move," Silas decided. "Those men might return with reinforcements. My horse can carry 2 of you at a time. There's a creek about 3 miles east with good cover. We'll make camp there tonight and figure things out in the morning." Vivian nodded, her face resolute despite their circumstances. "Charlotte, you and Emma go first. I'll wait with Mr. Ingram. Please call me Silas," he said, helping the 2 younger sisters onto his horse. "I'll be back for you within the hour, Miss Garrison." "Vivian," she corrected him, offering a tired smile that nonetheless lit up her face in a way that caught Silas off guard. "And thank you. You saved our lives today." As Silas led his horse away with Emma and Charlotte, he glanced back at Vivian standing tall among the wreckage of their journey, her auburn hair catching the last rays of sunlight. Something stirred within him, a feeling he'd long thought buried beneath years of wandering and solitude. By nightfall, Silas had established a small camp in a protected gully near the creek. A modest fire crackled as the three sisters huddled close for warmth. He'd managed to retrieve their most essential belongings, though many of their possessions remained scattered across the prairie. "Were you heading to Sloan yourself?" Vivian asked as she accepted a tin cup of coffee from him. Silas nodded. "I've been hired to help at the Thompson Ranch outside of town. They're short-handed for the season." "Are you a cowboy then?" Charlotte asked, her youthful curiosity emerging now that they were safe. "Sometimes," Silas replied with a hint of a smile. "I've been a lot of things over the years." "A guardian angel today," Emma added softly. Meeting his gaze with grateful eyes, Vivian studied him in the firelight. "You handle a gun like a lawman." "Cavalry scout during the war, then a marshal's deputy for a time in Wyoming Territory," Silas explained, his voice matter of fact. "Found I prefer open skies to jail cells and courtrooms." The night deepened around them as they shared the simple meal Silas had prepared from his provisions. The sisters spoke little of their past, but Silas gathered they came from money-back East Boston, from the hints Vivian dropped. Their father was some kind of banker or businessman who had sent them west following their mother's death. As the younger sisters drifted to sleep, wrapped in blankets near the fire, Vivian remained awake, her gaze fixed on the stars overhead. "What will you do now?" Silas asked quietly, not wanting to disturb Emma and Charlotte. Vivian sighed, the weight of responsibility evident in her slumped shoulders. "I don't know. Father sent us with enough money to establish ourselves with Aunt Martha's help, but without her." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "I'll find work in Sloan. I can sew and keep accounts. Emma is quite accomplished at the piano and Charlotte has a gift with children. We'll manage somehow." Silas tossed another small branch onto the fire. "Sloan's a growing town, but it's still rough. Not many respectable positions for young ladies of your upbringing." "We have no choice," Vivian replied firmly. "We can't return east. Father's new wife made it quite clear we weren't welcome once Mother was gone." The bitterness in her voice revealed more than perhaps she intended. Silas had encountered many tales of hardship in his years roaming the frontier, but something about these sisters, about Vivian in particular, stirred his protective instincts. "The Thompson Ranch where I'm headed," he said slowly. "Mrs. Thompson mentioned needing help with the house and the ranch accounts. Her eyesight's failing, and her husband's too proud to admit they need assistance. It's not what you're accustomed to, but it would be safe, respectable work for a time." Hope flickered across Vivian's tired features. "Do you think she would consider all three of us? It's a big operation. They could use the help if they'd admit it." Silas stared into the flames. "I can speak to them when we arrive." "Why would you do this for us?" Vivian asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Silas considered the question. He'd spent years drifting from one job to the next, never staying long enough to form attachments. Yet something about these sisters, their courage in the face of adversity, their determination to forge ahead despite overwhelming odds, resonated with him. "Everyone needs help sometimes," he finally answered. "Even stubborn cowboys like me." Vivian's smile in response warmed something long cold within him. Morning brought clear skies and the practical challenges of their situation. With only one horse between the four of them, progress toward Sloan would be slow. Silas fashioned a travois from branches to carry their remaining belongings, but they would still need to take turns riding and walking. "We'll reach town by tomorrow evening if we make good time," Silas explained as they broke camp. "Charlotte can ride with me first. Emma and Vivian, are you able to walk for a while?" Both women nodded determinedly, though their fine boots were hardly designed for a prairie trek. Silas made a mental note to find them more suitable footwear in town. They set out as the sun rose higher, Silas leading his horse with Charlotte riding side saddle, while Vivian and Emma walked alongside. Despite their circumstances, the sisters maintained a quiet dignity that impressed Silas. These were not pampered city girls unable to face hardship, but resilient young women adapting to their circumstances. By midday, they had covered nearly 7 miles. Silas called a halt near a small pond where wild grasses grew tall. While the horse grazed, they shared a simple meal of jerky and hardtack from Silas's provisions. "Tell us about the Thompson Ranch," Emma requested as they rested in the shade of Silas's outstretched duster, which he'd rigged as a makeshift canopy. "It's one of the larger spreads in the territory," Silas explained. "Old man Thompson came out here 20 years ago with nothing but determination and a small herd. Now he runs nearly 2,000 head of cattle. His wife Sarah is known for her kindness, though I've only met her briefly when Thompson hired me in Miles City last month." "Do they have children?" Charlotte asked. A shadow crossed Silas's face. "They had a son, lost him to typhoid about 5 years back. That's part of why they need help, no heir to take over the operation." Vivian's eyes met his with understanding, "and why Mrs. Thompson might welcome young people in her home again." Silas nodded. "That's my hope." They continued their journey through the afternoon, switching riders periodically to ensure no one became too exhausted. As the day progressed, Silas found himself increasingly drawn to Vivian's quiet strength. Unlike many young women of her station who might have collapsed into hysterics after their ordeal, she remained focused on the welfare of her sisters, never complaining despite the blisters forming on her delicate feet. As twilight approached, Silas scouted ahead and found a suitable camping spot in a protected draw. The night promised to be clear but cool, and he worked efficiently to establish their camp before darkness fell completely. "You've done this before," Vivian observed as she helped him gather wood for the fire. "More times than I can count," Silas replied. "Been on my own since I was 16. "What happened to your family?" she asked gently. Silas paused, his hands stilling on the branches he was arranging. Few people asked about his past, and fewer still received answers. Yet something about Vivian's direct gaze compelled honesty. "Lost my father to a mining accident in Colorado when I was 14. Mother remarried a man who had little use for another man's son. Left home 2 years later and never looked back." He shrugged as if dismissing the importance of the memory. "War came along soon after, gave me something to do with myself." Vivian didn't offer empty sympathies, which he appreciated. Instead, she simply nodded and continued helping with the fire. "We all find our own ways to survive," she said after a moment. "Emma, Charlotte, and I, we have each other. You found your path alone." "It's simpler that way," Silas responded, though even as he spoke the words, he questioned their truth. The solitary life had served him well, but watching the sisters together, their gentle teasing, their unwavering support of one another stirred a longing he rarely acknowledged. That night, after another simple meal, Silas kept watch as the sisters slept. His thoughts drifted to the Blackwater gang. They weren't known to give up easily, especially when a potential ransom was involved. If they discovered the Garrison sisters were traveling toward Sloan, they might attempt another ambush. His concerns proved prophetic shortly after dawn. As they prepared to continue their journey, Silas spotted dust on the horizon, riders approaching from the direction they had come. "Mount up," he ordered tersely, helping Charlotte and Emma onto his horse. "Vivian, you too. The horse can carry all three of you for a short distance." "What about you?" Vivian protested, even as she climbed up behind her sisters. "I'll catch up." Silas handed her the reins. "Head straight east toward that line of cottonwoods along the creek. Don't stop until you reach them." "Silas, go," he commanded, slapping the horse's flank to start it moving. "I'll be right behind you." As the sisters galloped away, Silas took position behind a large boulder, rifle ready. Through his spyglass, he confirmed his suspicions: 4 riders, including the scarred leader from yesterday and the 2 wounded men, plus 1 additional outlaw. Silas had the advantage of position and surprise. He waited until the riders were within range, then fired a warning shot that kicked up dust directly in their path. The riders pulled up short, scanning for the source of the shot. "That's far enough," Silas called out. "Those women are under my protection now. Turn back." The scarred leader laughed harshly. "1 man against 4. Those are poor odds, friend." "Better than you think," Silas replied calmly. 2 of your men are already wounded, and I've got the high ground with a clear shot at each of you. Walk away now and everyone lives." A tense silence followed as the outlaws assessed their situation. Finally, the leader spat on the ground. "This ain't over. Those Garrison girls are worth a small fortune to the right buyer. We'll find them with or without you in the way." "You're welcome to try," Silas responded, his rifle steady. "But you should know I've already sent word to the marshal in Sloan about the Blackwater gang targeting the Garrison sisters. They'll be watching for you." It was a bluff, but a calculated one. The leader's expression darkened with uncertainty. After a moment's hesitation, he jerked his head at his companions. "Let's go. We'll find easier pickings elsewhere." Silas remained in position until the riders had disappeared back the way they had come. Only then did he emerge from cover and set off at a run toward the cottonwoods where he'd sent the sisters. He found them hidden among the trees, Vivian holding the horse's reins with white-knuckled hands while trying to comfort her frightened sisters. "They've gone," Silas announced as he approached, slightly winded from his run. "But we need to keep moving. They might circle back." Relief flooded Vivian's face. "We thought, when we heard the shot." "Just letting them know I meant business," Silas assured her with more confidence than he felt. "Now let's get to Sloan before they change their minds." They traveled at a faster pace that day, Silas now walking alongside the horse carrying all 3 sisters and their meager belongings. By late afternoon, his keen eyes spotted a welcome sight in the distance: the scattered buildings of Sloan rising from the prairie. "We'll be there before sunset," he told the sisters, whose exhaustion was evident despite their attempts to hide it. As they approached the outskirts of town, Silas helped the sisters dismount to walk the final stretch. It wouldn't do for them to appear completely destitute upon arrival, though their once fine dresses were now travel-stained and wrinkled. Sloan was typical of frontier towns that had sprung up to serve the surrounding ranches and passing travelers. A single main street was lined with the essential businesses: general store, saloon, blacksmith, small hotel, and an assortment of other establishments. At the far end stood a modest church, its white steeple the tallest structure in town. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. Though Sloan saw its share of newcomers, 3 young women in the company of a trail-worn cowboy drew curious glances from the townspeople going about their evening business. Silas led them directly to the sheriff's office, a small wooden building with a sign identifying Hank Miller as the town's lawman. Inside, they found a barrel-chested man with a gray streaked mustache sitting behind a scarred desk. "Sheriff Miller," Silas greeted him, removing his hat. "Name's Silas Ingram. I've brought the Garrison sisters to town. They were attacked by the Blackwater gang 2 days' ride west of here." The sheriff's bushy eyebrows rose as he stood to greet them. "Garrison, Martha Garrison's nieces." Vivian stepped forward. "Yes, sir. We were coming to stay with our aunt, but we received word of her passing. Mr. Ingram rescued us from the outlaws who attacked our stagecoach." Sheriff Miller's expression softened with sympathy. "I was sorry to hear about your aunt. Fine lady she was. The whole town attended her funeral last month." He studied them thoughtfully. "Where will you be staying now?" "That's why we're here," Silas explained. "I'm hired on at the Thompson Ranch. Thought Mrs. Thompson might have use for these ladies' help, at least temporarily." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Sarah Thompson could certainly use the assistance, though her husband's a proud sort who doesn't like admitting they need help." He turned to address the sisters directly. "In the meantime, Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house has rooms. She knew your aunt well, might even give you a special rate under the circumstances." Relief visibly washed over the sisters at this small kindness. Silas thanked the sheriff and provided a brief description of the Blackwater gang members they'd encountered. "I'll keep an eye out," Sheriff Miller promised, "and I'll send word to the territorial marshal about their activities. Been trying to catch up to that bunch for months." With this matter settled, Silas escorted the sisters to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, a 2-story clapboard structure with a small garden in front. The proprietress, a plump, gray-haired widow with kind eyes, welcomed them warmly once their situation was explained. "Any nieces of Martha Garrison are welcome here," she declared, ushering them inside. "I've a room with 2 beds that should accommodate you girls just fine. Come in. Come in, you look dead on your feet, poor dears." As the sisters followed Mrs. Henderson inside, Vivian paused on the threshold, turning back to Silas, who remained standing by his horse. "You're not staying?" she asked, a note of disappointment in her voice. "I should report to the Thompson Ranch," Silas replied. "They're expecting me. I'll speak to them about positions for you and your sisters." Vivian descended the steps to stand before him. Up close, despite the dirt and fatigue of their journey, her beauty struck him anew, not the fragile porcelain beauty of society women, but something stronger, more resilient. "How can we ever repay you?" she asked softly. Silas shook his head. "No need for that, just doing what anyone would." "We both know that's not true," Vivian countered. "Most men would have ridden on, not risked their lives for strangers." She hesitated, then impulsively reached out to touch his arm. "Thank you, Silas, truly." The simple contact sent an unexpected warmth through him. "I'll return tomorrow," he promised. "Get some rest now." As he rode out of town toward the Thompson Ranch, Silas found his thoughts lingering on Vivian Garrison, her quiet strength, her unwavering focus on her sister's welfare, the surprising softness in her eyes when she had thanked him. It had been a long time since a woman had affected him this way, and the feeling was both unsettling and oddly welcome. The Thompson Ranch lay 5 miles outside of Sloan, a sprawling operation with a substantial main house, bunkhouse, barn, and various outbuildings. As Silas approached in the gathering dusk, lamplight glowed from the windows of the main house, a 2-story structure built of solid timber. He was greeted in the yard by Caleb Thompson himself, a weathered man in his 60s with a full beard and the bow-legged stance of a lifelong horseman. "Ingram," Thompson acknowledged gruffly. "Started to think you weren't coming." "Got delayed helping some folks in trouble," Silas explained, dismounting. 3 young women whose stagecoach was attacked by the Blackwater gang." Thompson's expression darkened. "Those bastards still operating in these parts. Thought they'd moved on to Wyoming territory. Apparently not." Silas led his horse toward the barn. The women were Martha Garrison's nieces, coming to stay with their aunt only to learn she'd passed. Martha's nieces. Thompson's gruff demeanor softened slightly. Sarah was fond of Martha. They took tea together whenever Martha came to town. He followed Silas into the barn. What'll happen to the girls now? Silas began unsaddling his horse. They're at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house for the moment. I was hoping to speak with you and Mrs. Thompson about possible positions for them here at the ranch. Thompson's bushy eyebrows drew together. What kind of positions? The eldest, Miss Vivian, mentioned she can keep accounts and so. The middle sister is accomplished at the piano, and the youngest has a way with children. Silas chose his words carefully. I recalled Mrs. Thompson mentioning her eyesight was troubling her, thought perhaps she might appreciate some assistance. A guarded look crossed Thompson's face. Sarah's eyes are fine, he said stiffly, then sighed at Silas's knowing look. She told you, did she? Damn woman won't admit when she needs help, not even to me. Seems to be a common trait around here, Silas observed mildly. Thompson snorted, but there was a reluctant humor in it. Get your horse settled and come up to the house. Sarah will want to hear about Martha's nieces. Within the hour, Silas found himself seated at the Thompsons' dining table, recounting the sisters' ordeal to a sympathetic Sarah Thompson. Despite her husband's denial, Silas could see the milky cloudiness in her eyes that spoke of advancing cataracts. Poor dears, Mrs. Thompson murmured when he finished his tale. Coming all this way only to find their aunt gone. What will become of them? That's what I wanted to discuss, Silas replied, glancing between husband and wife. They need safe employment and a place to stay. I thought perhaps here at the ranch. We don't need, Thompson began, but his wife laid a gentle hand on his arm. Caleb, she said softly, we've been struggling since Ethan passed. You know it's true. I can barely read the account books anymore, and you refuse to wear spectacles even though Doc Simmons prescribed them 2 years ago. Thompson's mouth opened, then closed without protest. Sarah turned back to Silas with a decisive nod. Bring the Garrison girls out tomorrow. We'll see if we can come to an arrangement. Later, as Silas settled into his assigned bunk in the ranch hand's quarters, he found himself strangely restless. The events of the past few days had disrupted the solitary rhythm of his life in unexpected ways. The memory of Vivian Garrison's grateful smile lingered in his mind as he drifted toward sleep, bringing with it an unfamiliar sense of anticipation for the morning to come. Dawn found Silas already up and tending to his horse. After a hearty breakfast with the other ranch hands, he sought out Thompson to request the use of the ranch wagon. Going to fetch those Garrison girls? Thompson asked, eyeing him with newfound interest. Sarah's been up since first light, getting rooms ready in the east wing. If they agree to come, Silas replied. Thompson studied him for a moment. Something tells me they will, especially if you're doing the asking. Silas ignored the implication as he hitched the team to the wagon and set out for Sloan. The morning was clear and cool, the kind of perfect autumn day that made the Montana Territory's harsh winters seem like distant impossibilities. He found the Garrison sisters already up and dressed when he arrived at the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson had clearly taken them under her wing. Their clothes, while still worn from travel, had been cleaned and pressed, and all three looked refreshed after a night in proper beds. Mr. Ingram, Vivian greeted him with a warm smile that reached her eyes. We hoped you would come today. Mrs. Thompson is eager to meet you all, Silas informed them. She's preparing rooms at the ranch as we speak. Hope brightened Vivian's expression. Then they're willing to consider us for positions. More than willing, Silas assured her. Mrs. Thompson practically ordered me to bring you back with me. After gathering their few belongings and thanking Mrs. Henderson for her kindness, the sisters climbed aboard the Thompson wagon. Silas couldn't help noticing how Vivian's eyes lit up at the sight of the open countryside as they left town behind. "It's beautiful here," she commented, gazing at the rolling grasslands stretching toward distant mountains. "Different from anything we knew back east." "Harsher too," Silas cautioned. "Winter comes early and stays late in these parts. Summer brings drought some years, flooding others. It takes a certain kind of person to make a life here." "Like you?" Vivian asked, studying his profile. Silas kept his eyes on the road. "I'm just passing through like always." "Always." There was something in her tone, not quite challenge, not quite disappointment. "So far," he amended, surprising himself with the qualification. They arrived at the Thompson ranch to find Sarah waiting on the front porch. A tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair and a dignified bearing despite her failing eyesight. She welcomed the sisters warmly, ushering them inside while Caleb Thompson and Silas unloaded their trunks from the wagon. "She seems happy," Thompson observed gruffly as they carried the luggage into the house. "Haven't seen Sarah this animated since before Ethan died." Inside, they found Sarah already showing the sisters around the main floor of the house, pointing out the parlor with its rarely used piano, the dining room, and the large kitchen where most of the daily activity centered. "Emma, dear, you must play for us after dinner," Sarah was saying. "That piano hasn't been touched in years, and Caleb paid good money to have it brought all the way from St. Louis." Emma blushed with pleasure at being singled out. "I would be delighted, Mrs. Thompson, though I'm dreadfully out of practice." "And Charlotte," Sarah continued, turning to the youngest sister, "Caleb mentioned you have a way with children. Would you consider helping at the school in town? The teacher, Miss Winters, has nearly 30 children of all ages. She's been asking for an assistant." Charlotte's eyes widened with delight. "I would love that, madam." Finally, Sarah turned to Vivian. "As for you, my dear, I find myself in need of someone with a good head for figures and a steady hand for correspondence. My eyes aren't what they used to be, though my husband pretends not to notice." She cast an affectionate glance at Thompson, who grumbled something unintelligible but didn't contradict her. "I would be honored to assist you in any way I can," Vivian replied sincerely. "Excellent." Sarah clapped her hands together. "Then it's settled. You'll all stay here. We have plenty of room, and it will be lovely to have young people in the house again." The arrangement was formalized over dinner that evening. The sisters would have rooms in the main house and take their meals with the Thompsons. In exchange for their room and board plus a small salary, they would perform their respective duties. Charlotte would help at the school during the week. Emma would assist Sarah with household management and provide music in the evenings, and Vivian would take over the ranch accounts and correspondence. As Silas observed the sisters' integration into the Thompson household, he found himself particularly drawn to Vivian's quiet competence. Within days, she had organized the chaotic account books and drafted responses to a backlog of business correspondence that Sarah had been unable to address due to her failing eyesight. In the evenings, while Emma played the piano and Charlotte shared stories of her schoolchildren, Vivian often sat with a mending basket, her nimble fingers repairing garments while she contributed thoughtfully to the conversation. For his part, Silas threw himself into the work of the ranch. Fall was a busy season, with cattle to be rounded up from summer pastures and preparations to be made for the coming winter. He worked alongside the other hands from dawn until dusk, falling exhausted into his bunk each night. Yet despite his physical fatigue, he found himself increasingly alert whenever Vivian was nearby. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the dinner table, or she would bring account books to the bunkhouse, for his input on certain ranch operations. Each encounter left him both satisfied and hungry for more of her company. 2 weeks after the sisters' arrival, Silas was working in the corral with a young horse when he noticed Vivian approaching. She wore a simple brown skirt and white blouse, her auburn hair braided and pinned up in a practical style that somehow enhanced rather than diminished her natural beauty. "Mr. Ingram," she called, stopping at the corral fence. "Mrs. Thompson asked me to remind you about the harvest social in town tomorrow evening. She insists everyone from the ranch should attend." Silas patted the horse's neck and secured it to a post before approaching the fence. "I'm not much for town socials, Miss Garrison." A smile played at the corners of Vivian's mouth. "That's what Mrs. Thompson said you'd say. She also said to tell you that refusal is not an option." Silas chuckled despite himself. "Sarah Thompson is a formidable woman. Indeed she is." Vivian's expression grew more serious. "She's been so kind to us, Silas. I don't know what would have become of my sisters and me without your intervention and the Thompsons' generosity." "You would have managed," Silas said with certainty. "You're not a woman who gives up easily, Vivian Garrison." A pleased flush colored her cheeks at his use of her first name. "Nevertheless, we owe you a great debt." "There is no debt between friends," Silas replied. Vivian studied him for a long moment. "Is that what we are, friends?" The question hung in the air between them, carrying weight beyond its simple words. Silas found himself at an unusual loss for response. Were they friends? The term seemed inadequate for the connection he felt growing between them, yet he hesitated to acknowledge anything deeper. "I would be honored to count you as a friend," he finally answered. Something flickered in Vivian's eyes, disappointment, perhaps, but she quickly masked it with a polite smile. "Then, as a friend, I hope you'll reconsider attending the social. Charlotte and Emma are very excited about it, and—" She hesitated briefly. "I would appreciate a familiar face among the crowd." Put that way, how could he refuse? "I'll be there," Silas promised. Her genuine smile of delight was worth any discomfort the social might bring. "Wonderful, Mrs. Thompson says we'll all ride into town together after the day's work is done." As she walked back toward the house, Silas found himself watching her retreating figure with a mixture of admiration and confusion. In his years of wandering, he had never allowed himself to form attachments to people or places. It was easier that way, cleaner. Yet something about Vivian Garrison made him question the solitary path he had chosen for himself. The harvest social proved to be a lively affair. The town hall had been decorated with autumn leaves and harvest bounty, and nearly everyone from Sloan and the surrounding ranches had turned out for the occasion. A small band played in one corner while tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes brought by the attendees. Silas arrived with the Thompson party, uncomfortably aware of the clean shirt and polished boots he wore for the occasion. He'd even trimmed his beard and slicked back his usually unruly hair with water. The effort felt foreign, yet the appreciative glance Vivian gave him when he helped her down from the wagon made the discomfort worthwhile. She wore a dress of deep green that complemented her auburn hair and brought out the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. It was still simple by Eastern standards, but Silas thought she had never looked more beautiful. "You clean up well, Cowboy," she teased lightly as they entered the hall together, Charlotte and Emma following behind with the Thompsons. "Don't get used to it," he warned with a half-smile. "Tomorrow it's back to dust and leather." The evening progressed pleasantly enough. Silas found himself introduced to various townsfolk as the man who rescued the Garrison sisters, a title that made him uncomfortable but seemed to elevate his standing in the community's eyes. Emma played several pieces on the upright piano in the corner to enthusiastic applause, while Charlotte was surrounded by her young pupils who were delighted to see their assistant teacher outside of school. Vivian remained largely by Silas's side, her presence both comforting and unsettling. He was acutely aware of her every movement, every smile, every gentle laugh at the stories being shared around them. When the band struck up a lively tune, couples began to move to the cleared area in the center of the hall. "Would you care to dance, Miss Garrison?" Silas found himself asking, surprising even himself with the invitation. Vivian's eyes widened slightly before a pleased smile curved her lips. "I would be delighted, Mr. Ingram, though I should warn you that Boston ballrooms and frontier dances may have different expectations." "I reckon we'll figure it out together," he replied, offering his arm. The dance was indeed different from anything Vivian had likely experienced in Eastern society. But she adapted quickly, laughing as Silas guided her through the simple steps. Her hand felt small but strong in his, her waist delicate beneath his other palm as they turned together in time with the music. "You're full of surprises, Silas Ingram," she commented as they completed a figure. "I wouldn't have taken you for a dancing man." "There's a lot you don't know about me," he replied, more seriously than he had intended. Vivian's expression sobered to match his tone. "I'd like to," she said simply. Before Silas could respond, the music ended and they were swept into conversations with others nearby. The moment passed, but Vivian's words lingered in his mind throughout the evening. As the social began to wind down, Silas stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The night was clear and cool, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. He leaned against the railing of the town hall's small porch, content to be momentarily alone with his thoughts. "Too crowded for you in there," Vivian's voice came from behind him. Silas turned to find her standing in the doorway, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the evening chill. "Just needed some air," he replied as she came to stand beside him. "I'm not used to so much company." "The solitary cowboy," she observed, but there was no mockery in her tone. "Do you prefer it that way, always moving, never settling?" Silas considered the question. "It's simpler," he finally said. "No expectations, no disappointments, no connections," Vivian added softly. "No one to worry about, no one to worry about you." "Exactly." She turned to face him directly. "Is that really what you want, Silas? To go through life touching no one and being touched by no one?" The directness of her question struck him like a physical blow. He had never articulated his life choices so clearly, even to himself. Put into words by this remarkable woman, his solitary existence suddenly seemed not simpler but emptier. "It's what I know," he answered honestly. Vivian's eyes searched his face in the moonlight. "Things can change, people can change. Some people." "You saved us," she said quietly. "You could have ridden past when you saw the stage coach under attack. You could have left us at the boarding house once we reached town. But you didn't. That tells me something about Silas Ingram that perhaps even he doesn't recognize." "What's that?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion he rarely permitted himself to feel. "That underneath that solitary exterior beats a heart that cares deeply." She reached out and placed her hand lightly over his where it rested on the railing. Too deeply to be truly content alone. The touch of her hand sent warmth spreading through him despite the cool night air. Silas found himself at another crossroads, one more significant than any trail choice he had made in his years of wandering. He could pull away, maintain the distance that had protected him for so long. Or he could acknowledge the truth in her words and the feelings growing within him. Before he could decide, the door to the hall opened again, spilling light and sound onto the porch. Emma stood there, looking between them with an expression that suggested she understood she had interrupted something significant. "Mrs. Thompson is ready to return to the ranch," she said apologetically. "She's asking for you both." Vivian withdrew her hand from Silas's, though her eyes held his for a moment longer. "We'll be right there, Emma." As Emma retreated back inside, Vivian sighed softly. "We should go." Silas nodded, but as she turned to leave, he caught her arm gently. "Vivian." She looked back, hope and uncertainty mingling in her expression. "Thank you," he said simply. Her smile in response was like sunrise breaking over the prairie, gradual, then suddenly brilliant. "You're welcome, Silas." The ride back to the Thompson ranch was quiet, everyone tired from the evening's festivities. Silas drove the wagon, acutely aware of Vivian seated beside him on the bench, their shoulders occasionally brushing as the wheels hit ruts in the road. The next few weeks brought a shift in the rhythm of ranch life. As autumn deepened toward winter, the pace of outdoor work slowed somewhat, giving Silas more time at the ranch proper rather than out with the cattle. He found himself looking for opportunities to be near the main house, volunteering for tasks that might bring him into Vivian's orbit. For her part, Vivian seemed equally drawn to his company. She began taking afternoon walks around the ranch grounds, her path often intersecting with Silas's duties. These chance meetings led to conversations that grew increasingly personal as their comfort with one another deepened. Silas learned of her childhood in Boston, the daughter of a banker whose social ambitions had intensified after his wife's death. Vivian shared stories of her mother's kindness and her father's subsequent remarriage to a younger woman who had little interest in her 3 stepdaughters. In turn, Silas gradually revealed more of his own past, his childhood in a Colorado mining town, his years as a cavalry scout, the brief period he'd spent as a lawman before the constraints of town life became too confining. "Have you never wanted a home of your own?" Vivian asked one crisp afternoon as they walked along the creek that ran through Thompson property. Silas tossed a stone into the water, watching the ripples spread. "Never stayed in one place long enough to consider it." "But if you did stay," she pressed gently. He glanced at her, noting the color the cool air brought to her cheeks and the earnestness in her gaze. "I suppose I'd want land, enough for a modest herd and good horses. A small house to start, though nothing grand." Vivian smiled at this rare glimpse into his dreams. "It sounds lovely." "What about you?" Silas turned the question back to her. "Is this what you imagined for yourself, keeping books on a cattle ranch in Montana territory?" She laughed softly. "Hardly. Father expected us all to make advantageous marriages. My future was supposed to involve Boston society, a husband chosen more for his bank account than his character, and a life of social obligations. And now," Vivian's pace slowed as she considered her answer, "now I find I prefer the honesty of life here. People may have less, but they seem to live more truly." She glanced up at him. "I've discovered strengths in myself I never knew existed, independence I never thought I'd have." "You're a remarkable woman, Vivian Garrison," Silas said quietly. A pleased blush colored her cheeks at his praise. "I'm learning to be." Their growing closeness did not go unnoticed. Emma and Charlotte exchanged knowing glances whenever Silas and Vivian were together, while Sarah Thompson watched their developing relationship with maternal approval. Even the ranch hands had begun to tease Silas good-naturedly about his interest in the pretty bookkeeper, as they called Vivian. He endured their jibes with outward stoicism, though privately he found himself wondering what it might be like to truly court Vivian, to officially declare his intentions, and perhaps, eventually, offer her the kind of permanent connection he had always avoided. The opportunity to test these unfamiliar waters came in late November. News reached the ranch that a traveling preacher would be conducting services in Sloan on Sunday, followed by a community dinner. Sarah immediately declared that everyone from the Thompson household would attend, and Caleb, as was increasingly common in matters related to Sarah's wishes, offered no objection. On Sunday morning, Silas found himself once again in his best clothes, driving the Thompson wagon toward town with Vivian beside him on the bench. She wore a blue dress he hadn't seen before, and a small hat with a ribbon that matched the color of her eyes. "You look nice," he said, the words feeling inadequate for the vision she presented. Vivian's smile lit up her entire face. "Thank you. Mrs. Thompson helped me remake one of my old dresses. She's quite skilled with a needle despite her eyesight." The church service itself was unremarkable standard frontier, preaching that emphasized perseverance and community. What remained with Silas afterward was not the sermon but the feeling of sitting beside Vivian, their shoulders touching in the crowded pew, her voice blending with his during the hymns. At the community dinner that followed in the town hall, Silas found himself once again at Vivian's side, both of them drawn together as naturally as if they had planned it. They sat with Emma, Charlotte, and the Thompsons at a long table, sharing food and conversation with neighboring ranchers and townspeople. The sense of belonging that washed over Silas during that simple meal was both unfamiliar and deeply satisfying. He had spent so many years defining himself by his solitude, his ability to move on without entanglements. Yet here, among these people, especially beside this woman, he found himself considering a different kind of life. As they prepared to return to the ranch later that afternoon, Sheriff Miller approached their wagon. "Ingram," he called, his expression serious. "Got a moment?" Silas handed the reins to Vivian and stepped aside with the sheriff. "Problem." Miller glanced around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. "Got word from the marshal over in Miles City. The Blackwater gang hit a stage about 40 miles north of here 3 days ago, killed 2 passengers and the driver." A cold weight settled in Silas's stomach. "They're getting bolder." "Worse than that," Miller continued grimly. "One of the passengers they questioned before killing mentioned the Garrison sisters by name. Seems they haven't given up on collecting that ransom they think exists." Silas's jaw tightened. "The sisters have been safe at the Thompson ranch. No one outside town knows exactly where they are. True, but folks talk. Word gets around." Miller shook his head. "Just thought you should know to keep an eye out. I've doubled patrols around town, but we're stretched thin as it is." "I appreciate the warning." Silas clasped the sheriff's shoulder. "We'll be vigilant." As he returned to the wagon, Silas worked to compose his expression, not wanting to alarm Vivian with this new information. However, her perceptive gaze caught the tension in his shoulders immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly as he climbed back onto the bench. Silas hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Sheriff Miller received word that the Blackwater gang is still in the territory. They haven't forgotten about you and your sisters." Fear flashed briefly in Vivian's eyes before she mastered it. "I see. Should we be concerned?" Cautious, Silas clarified. "No need to frighten Emma and Charlotte, but we should all be more alert." Vivian nodded, unconsciously moving closer to him on the bench. "Will you tell Mr. Thompson as soon as we return?" Silas picked up the reins, his protective instincts fully engaged. "The ranch is secure, but we'll take extra precautions." The ride back to the Thompson ranch was quieter than their journey into town had been. Vivian remained close to Silas's side, her earlier carefree demeanor replaced by a watchful alertness that matched his own. Upon their return, Silas immediately sought out Thompson and shared the sheriff's warning. The ranch owner's response was swift and practical. Additional men would patrol the property boundaries, and no one would ride out alone until the threat had passed. That evening, As the household gathered in the parlor after dinner, the mood was subdued despite Emma's cheerful piano playing. Silas noticed how Vivian kept glancing toward the windows, her usual composure disrupted by the knowledge that danger might still be lurking. When the others had retired for the night, Silas found himself reluctant to return to the bunkhouse. Instead, he volunteered for the first watch, taking up position on the main house porch where he could observe the approach to the ranch. He had been there perhaps an hour when the door opened softly behind him. Vivian stepped out, wrapped in a shawl against the night chill, a steaming cup in her hands. "I thought you might appreciate some coffee," she said, offering him the cup. "It's too cold to be standing guard without something warm." Silas accepted the coffee gratefully. "You should be asleep." "I couldn't," she admitted, moving to stand beside him at the porch railing. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those men again, hear their voices." He understood without her needing to elaborate. Trauma left its mark, often emerging most strongly in the vulnerable moments between wakefulness and sleep. "You're safe here," he assured her. "Thompson has good men working for him, and the ranch is well protected." "Because of you," Vivian said quietly. "You've been our guardian from the beginning, Silas." He shook his head. "I just happened to be riding by." "No." Vivian turned to face him directly. "There are no coincidences of that magnitude. You were meant to find us that day, just as we were meant to come here." Her expression was earnest in the lantern light. "I believe that." Silas had never been a man for destiny or divine intervention. He believed in what he could see and touch, in actions rather than abstract concepts. Yet looking at Vivian now, he found himself wanting to believe in something greater than chance, something that might explain the powerful connection he felt to this woman he had known for such a short time. "What happens when the danger passes?" he asked, the question emerging before he could reconsider it. "Will you and your sisters move on? Return east, perhaps?" Vivian's eyes widened slightly at the direct question. "Is that what you think we should do?" "No," Silas answered honestly, "but I wonder what you want." "The Thompsons have been kind, but this is still a temporary arrangement. You had other plans before. Before you saved us," she finished for him. "Before everything changed." Vivian's gaze dropped to her hands for a moment before returning to his face. "Emma is happier than I've ever seen her, playing music for people who truly appreciate it rather than judging her technique. Charlotte has found her calling with the children at the school, and I—" She hesitated. "And you?" Silas prompted gently. "I've found something I never expected," Vivian admitted softly. "A place where I feel useful, people who value me for my abilities rather than my family name or potential marriage prospects." Her voice dropped even lower. "And a man who sees me as I truly am, not as society dictates I should be." The honesty of her words struck Silas with the force of physical impact. In all his years of wandering, no one had ever spoken to him with such open vulnerability, such trust. "Vivian," he began, uncertain what he wanted to say but knowing he needed to say something. A sound from the darkness interrupted him, the distant but unmistakable crack of a rifle shot, followed immediately by shouting from the direction of the western pasture. Silas was instantly alert, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Get inside," he ordered Vivian. "Wake Thompson and tell him to arm himself. Then stay with your sisters in the back bedroom until one of us comes for you." The fear had returned to Vivian's eyes, but she nodded resolutely. "Be careful, Silas." As she disappeared into the house, Silas moved swiftly toward the bunkhouse where the other ranch hands were already emerging, drawn by the commotion. Within minutes, they had organized into defensive positions around the main buildings, rifles ready. One of the night guards came running from the direction of the shots, his hat missing and a wild look in his eyes. Rustlers, he gasped, or outlaws, not sure. 6, maybe 7 of them. They shot Jake when he challenged them. Thompson emerged from the house, rifle in hand. Where are they now? Last I saw, they were heading this way, the guard reported. Jake got a shot off before he went down. Might have hit one of them. Silas's mind raced through possibilities. If this was indeed the Blackwater gang, their target wasn't cattle but the Garrison sisters. The rustling attempt could be a diversion to draw defenders away from the house. Thompson, he said urgently, we need men at the house. If it's the Blackwater gang, they're after the sisters, not your cattle. Understanding dawned in Thompson's weathered face. Jenkins, Carter, stay with the house, he ordered 2 of his men. The rest of you spread out. Don't let anyone near the main buildings. Silas positioned himself on the porch steps, his rifle trained on the approaching darkness. Minutes stretched like hours as they waited. The only sounds the occasional nervous snort of horses in the nearby corral and the wind rustling through the bare trees. Then, from the opposite direction of the initial disturbance, came movement, shadowy figures approaching from the east, using the outbuildings as cover. Contact east, Silas called out sharply, firing a warning shot over the figures' heads. The response was immediate muzzle flashes in the darkness as the intruders returned fire, bullets splintering wood around the defenders. Silas ducked behind a porch pillar, then rose to fire again with more deliberate aim. A cry of pain told him his shot had found its mark. The firefight intensified as Thompson and his men engaged the attackers from multiple positions. Silas caught glimpses of the intruders as they moved between buildings. 5 men, maybe 6, their faces obscured by bandanas. Through the chaos, he noticed 2 figures breaking away from the main group, circling toward the back of the house where fewer defenders were positioned. Understanding their strategy instantly, Silas abandoned his position and raced through the house to the rear entrance. He burst through the back door just as the 2 men were ascending the steps. At such close range, his rifle was unwieldy, so he dropped it and drew his revolver in one fluid motion. That's far enough, he stated coldly, his gun trained on the lead figure. The man froze, then slowly lowered the bandana covering his face. In the dim light spilling from the house windows, Silas recognized the scarred features of the Blackwater gang leader. Should have known you'd still be hanging around, the outlaw drawled. Got yourself sweet on one of them Garrison girls, have you? Last chance to walk away, Silas replied, ignoring the taunt. The sheriff knows you're in the area. The territorial marshal has been alerted. This ends badly for you any way you play it. The outlaw leader laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Maybe, but those girls are worth a fortune to their daddy back east, enough to set a man up proper, far from any marshal's jurisdiction. His hand hovered near his holstered gun. Step aside, cowboy. No need for you to die over this. Not going to happen. What happened next occurred in the span of heartbeats. The outlaw went for his gun, but Silas was faster. 2 shots rang out in quick succession. The leader staggered backward, a look of shock crossing his face before he collapsed on the stairs. His companion, seeing his boss fall, turned to flee but ran directly into Thompson and 2 of his men who had circled around from the front of the house. With their leader down and their attempt at stealth foiled, the remaining outlaws quickly lost heart for the fight. 2 more were wounded in their retreat, and 1 surrendered when he found himself cornered in the barn. By the time Sheriff Miller arrived with a hastily assembled posse an hour later, the threat had been neutralized. The Blackwater gang leader was dead, 2 others seriously wounded, and 1 in custody. The remaining gang members had fled into the night, but with their leadership decimated and their plans exposed, Miller was confident they would disperse rather than regroup. "You folks were lucky," Miller commented as he supervised the loading of prisoners into his wagon. "If they'd managed to get into the house—" "It wasn't luck," Thompson interrupted gruffly. "It was Ingram here. He figured their plan before they could execute it." Miller nodded respectfully in Silas's direction. "The territory owes you a debt, Ingram. I'll make sure that's noted in my report to the marshal." Silas acknowledged the sheriff's words with a nod, but his attention was elsewhere. As soon as the immediate danger had passed, he had sent word to the sisters that it was safe to emerge. Now, as the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, he watched Vivian hurrying across the yard toward him, her face pale with concern. "Silas," she called as she approached. "They said there was shooting that you." She stopped abruptly when she reached him, her eyes widening as she noticed the blood on his sleeve. "It's just a graze," he assured her, though in truth the bullet wound along his upper arm stung fiercely. "One of them got lucky." Without speaking, Vivian took his uninjured arm and led him firmly toward the house. "Mrs. Thompson has medical supplies ready," she informed him, her tone brooking no argument. "You'll let us tend to that properly." Inside, Sarah Thompson had indeed prepared for treating the injured. Thompson himself was having a shallow head wound bandaged by Emma, while Charlotte helped organize bandages and medicines. "Sit," Vivian ordered Silas, pointing to a kitchen chair. Too weary to protest, he complied, allowing her to help him remove his blood-stained shirt. The bullet had torn a furrow along his left bicep, painful but not dangerous. Vivian cleaned the wound with gentle efficiency, her hands steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "You could have been killed," she said quietly as she worked, her voice pitched for his ears alone. "But I wasn't," Silas replied simply. Vivian paused in her ministrations to meet his gaze directly. "When I heard the shooting, all I could think was that I might never see you again, that we might never finish our conversation from earlier." Despite the pain and exhaustion, Silas felt a surge of warmth at her words. "We'll finish it," he promised. "When things settle down." She nodded, returning her attention to bandaging his arm. "I'll hold you to that, Silas Ingram." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The sheriff's report to the territorial marshal confirmed that the Blackwater gang had indeed been targeting the Garrison sisters based on misinformation about a non-existent ransom. With their leader dead and several members in custody, the remaining outlaws had scattered, effectively ending the threat. Word of the attempted attack spread quickly through the surrounding area, elevating the Thompson Ranch to near-legendary status for its successful defense. Neighbors dropped by with offers of assistance, though Thompson gruffly assured them everything was under control. Through it all, Silas found little opportunity for the private conversation he had promised Vivian. Between helping repair damage from the attack, giving statements to the sheriff, and resuming normal ranch duties, moments alone were scarce. It was nearly a week after the incident when Silas finally found himself with time to seek out Vivian. He located her in the small office off the main parlor, working on the ranch ledgers in the afternoon light streaming through the window. She looked up at his entrance, her face brightening. "Silas, how's your arm?" "Healing," he replied, closing the door behind him to ensure their privacy. "Your nursing skills are impressive." Vivian set down her pen and gave him her full attention. "Another unexpected talent discovered in the West," she said with a small smile. "What can I do for you today?" Silas took a deep breath, suddenly uncertain how to begin despite having rehearsed this conversation in his mind countless times over the past week. "I believe we had a conversation interrupted," he finally said, moving further into the room. "We did." Vivian's expression grew serious, though her eyes remained warm. "About what happens next for my sisters and me." Silas nodded, gathering his courage. I've been thinking about that. He paused, then plunged ahead. I've also been thinking about what I said regarding never staying in one place long enough to consider a home of my own. Vivian remained silent, waiting for him to continue, though he could see hope beginning to bloom in her expression. Thompson offered me a position as his foreman yesterday, Silas revealed. Permanent, with land of my own eventually if I stay on long enough. Did you accept? Vivian asked, her voice carefully controlled. I told him I needed to discuss it with someone first. Silas moved closer until he stood directly before her desk. With you, Vivian. She rose slowly from her chair, her eyes never leaving his. Why would you need to discuss it with me? Because your answer to my next question determines my answer to Thompson. Silas reached across the desk to take her hand in his. I've spent most of my life alone, convinced that was how I preferred it. Then I came across 3 young women in trouble and everything changed. You changed everything, Vivian. Her fingers tightened around his, encouraging him to continue. I'm not a man of many words, Silas admitted, but I know what I feel. I love you, Vivian Garrison. If you'll have me, I'd like to court you properly, with the intention of making a life together here in Sloan. Tears welled in Vivian's eyes, but her smile was radiant. Silas Ingram, she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. I have been hoping you would say those words since the night of the harvest social. She came around the desk to stand before him, still holding his hand. I love you too. I think perhaps I began to love you the moment you rode up to that overturned stagecoach, ready to risk your life for 3 strangers. The joy that flooded through Silas at her words was unlike anything he had ever experienced. With gentle reverence, he raised his free hand to touch her cheek. Then my answer to Thompson is yes, I'm staying in Sloan. And my sisters? Vivian asked, practical even in this moment of happiness. They're welcome to stay as long as they wish, Silas assured her, though from what I've observed, Emma has caught the eye of young Dr. Wilson in town, and Charlotte seems quite taken with her position at the school. Vivian laughed softly. You've been paying attention. To everything about you and your family, Silas confirmed. Then, with a courage born of her acceptance, he lowered his head and kissed her gently. The moment their lips met, Silas knew with absolute certainty that his wandering days were over. He had finally found his home not in a place, but in a person. As winter gave way to spring, the Thompson Ranch flourished under its new arrangements. Silas settled into his role as foreman with natural authority, while Vivian continued to manage the accounts with increasing responsibility, as Sarah Thompson's eyesight deteriorated further. Their courtship progressed with the blessing of both the Thompsons and Vivian's sisters. In the evenings, they would often walk together along the creek or sit on the porch watching the sunset, learning each other's histories and dreams in greater detail. Silas learned of Vivian's childhood passion for horseback riding, forbidden by her father as unladylike after her 13th birthday. In response, he taught her to ride Western style, delighting in her natural skill and the joy it brought her to gallop across the open prairie. Vivian discovered Silas's unexpected love of literature, dog-eared volumes of Dickens, and Twain that he kept in his saddlebags during his travels. She began reading aloud to him in the evenings, a practice that often drew the rest of the household to the parlor to listen. By early summer, their engagement was announced to the approval of the entire community. Thompson, in a gesture that revealed his true regard for Silas, offered them a parcel of ranch land as a wedding gift enough for a small house, and their own modest herd to start. Always meant for my son to have that piece, he explained gruffly when Silas tried to decline the generous offer. Sarah and I, we've come to think of you as the son we lost. Would make us proud to see that land put to good use by family. Family. The word resonated with Silas in ways he had never anticipated. From a solitary drifter to a man with not only a future wife, but a surrogate father and mother, two future sisters-in-law, and connections throughout the community, the transformation still amazed him. The wedding took place in September, when the harvest was complete and the weather still mild. The entire town of Sloan turned out for the occasion, along with ranchers and their families from miles around. Sheriff Miller stood as Silas's best man, while Emma and Charlotte served as Vivian's attendants. They were married in the small church at the end of Sloan's Main Street, Vivian radiant in a gown of cream-colored satin that she and Sarah had worked on for months. Silas, clean-shaven for the occasion and attired in a new black suit, could scarcely believe his good fortune as he watched his bride walk toward him on Thompson's arm. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, his voice carrying through the packed church. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Silas Ingram and Vivian Garrison." As they exchanged their vows, Silas was struck by the journey that had brought him to this moment, from a lonely rider happening upon a stagecoach under attack to a man pledging his life and love before friends and community. The wanderer had found his home at last. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and toasts to the couple's health and happiness. As the evening drew to a close, Silas and Vivian slipped away to the small cabin Thompson had helped them build on their new land, a simple structure for now, but with room to grow as their family expanded. "Happy, Mrs. Ingram?" Silas asked as he carried her across the threshold. Vivian's arms tightened around his neck as she smiled up at him. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she assured him, her eyes reflecting the love that had transformed both their lives. 1 year later, Silas stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching as Vivian walked toward him from the garden, their infant son cradled in her arms. The boy had his father's dark hair and his mother's expressive eyes, a perfect blend of them both. "James is finally asleep," Vivian reported as she joined her husband on the porch. "Emma's letter arrived today. She and Dr. Wilson have set a date for their wedding in the spring." "Good news," Silas commented, wrapping his arm around her shoulders as they gazed out at their growing herd grazing in the distance. "And Charlotte, still devoted to her students, though Sheriff Miller's new deputy seems determined to change her mind about remaining unmarried." Vivian's tone was amused. "He's called at the school 3 times this week with various excuses." Silas chuckled. "Smart man. Garrisons are worth pursuing, as I discovered." Vivian leaned against him, contentment radiating from her. "I never thanked you properly, you know." "For what?" "For stopping that day, for rescuing 3 terrified sisters with nowhere to go." She looked up at him, her expression softening with memory. "You changed our lives, Silas." He shook his head, tightening his arm around her. "You changed mine, Vivian. I was just passing through until I met you. You gave me a reason to stay." As the sunset painted the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson, Silas reflected on the strange and wonderful turns life could take. A chance encounter on the prairie had led to love, family, and a sense of belonging he had never thought to find. The wandering cowboy had finally come home,